Today, we're going to be historical detectives. Seriously, we're going to take a bunch of old, kind of dry records, census data, church notes, even a single gravestone, and see if we can piece together the life of a real person who lived over 200 years ago.
So, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, when there are no photos, no diaries, not a single person left who remembers them, how do you find the person hidden inside all that paperwork? How do you turn a bunch of data points into an actual human story?
Well, you follow the paper trail. It's that simple and that complex. Each document is a clue, a piece of the puzzle. Census records, they tell you where he lived and who his family was. Church notes, they give you a peek into his spiritual life. Land deeds show you his business side. And finally, the gravestone? Well, that's the final summary, literally carved in stone. These are our building blocks for the life of Jonathan Oatley.
All right, so our story kicks off in Rhode Island. This is where the foundation of Jonathan's life was built. It's where he found his faith and where he started his, well, you'll see, his enormous family.
The records give us the basic framework right away. He was born in 1790. But check this out. Look at 1813. He's 22 years old. He gets baptized in February, and then just 3 months later, in May, he marries his wife, Amy. You can almost feel the energy of a young life just taking off right here in these dates.
And by 1829, he's found his calling. He becomes the pastor of the First Baptist Church right there in his hometown. This really cements a core piece of his identity. He's a man of God, a leader in his community.
14. Just a number on a screen, right? But in the story of Jonathan Oatley's life, this number was his whole world.
Yep, 14 children. Can you imagine? Between 1815 and 1837, he and Amy had 14 kids. Seeing all the names laid out like this, it's more than just data. It paints a picture of over 20 years of life, of growth, and a whole lot of responsibility, all happening in Rhode Island.
But you know, life stories rarely stay in one place. After putting down all those roots in Rhode Island, Jonathan's life is about to take a huge turn. The whole family moves to Connecticut, and this is where he starts to lead this fascinating double life.
Just try to picture this for a second. It's 1834. You pack up everything you own, and you move your 12 children, remember, 2 more were still to come, to a totally new state. This wasn't just moving house. This was a massive, life-altering event that set the stage for a whole new chapter.
And it's in Connecticut that this incredible duality of his life really comes into focus. On the one hand, he continued his work as a pastor. But on the other, he worked with his hands. He and his sons were quarrymen. They were masons, working a place called the Oatley Ledges. He was a man of God and a man of stone, all at the same time.
And the official records totally back this up. When the census taker came around in 1850 and 1860, he didn't write down pastor or clergyman. Nope, he wrote stonecutter and mason. This tells you that his physical work, shaping the rock of the earth, was just as much a part of his identity, at least the outside world, as his work shaping souls.
But life's never that straightforward, is it? And the paper trail reveals a really difficult period for him. Right in the heart of his spiritual life, we find a record of a serious conflict, a true test of his faith.
Wow, that is a stark entry from the church's own records in 1847. Jonathan, his wife Amy, and a few of their kids were excluded. The language is so cold, so official. For a pastor, for a family that was the bedrock of this church, this had to have been absolutely devastating. And the record doesn't say why, which only adds to the drama.
But the story doesn't end there. 6 years later, in 1853, we find another entry. They were restored to the full fellowship. So, whatever the conflict was, it was resolved. The family was welcomed back home.
So think about that for a second. These 2 little administrative notes, probably just scribbled in a dusty church ledger, they reveal this incredibly powerful, deeply human story. They give us a whole narrative arc, rejection and then reconciliation, a family that fell out and then found its way back.
And that brings us to the final chapter. We're going to use the last set of records to piece together the end of Jonathan's long and, well, pretty complicated life.
How amazing is this detail? And it's not from a census record.
This comes from family lore, passed down through the generations. At 75 years old, he walked from his home in Connecticut all the way back to his hometown in Rhode Island. That says a lot about his physical strength, sure, but it says even more about his powerful connection to his past.
The final records map out the end of his journey with a sort of quiet dignity. First, in 1865, he loses his wife Amy, his partner for over 50 years. 5 years later, the census finds him at 79, living with his son's family. And then, in 1872, at the age of 82, Jonathan's own story comes to a close.
Now look closely at his death certificate. This is fascinating. After all those decades where the census called him a mason and a stonecutter, how is he officially remembered in the end? His usual occupation is listed as clergyman. In the final accounting, his life's most important work was seen as his ministry.
And the final piece of the puzzle, his gravestone, confirms it. The very first word carved into that stone, the identity that would last for eternity, is Reverend. The man of stone was ultimately remembered as the man of God. What a perfect summary of a long life, etched for all time.
So from just a handful of old records, a full, rich human story comes to life. One of faith, of family, of hard labor, of conflict, and finally, of peace. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Every one of us is leaving a trail of records, both digital and physical. What story will yours tell?